Hello, my marketing friends. It's Dr. G. Hey, I hope you're doing well today. We are going to discuss the really important topic of typography as it fits into your brand strategy. So you might be thinking, well, fonts, how big of a deal is a font really? And I will say, just like imagery and colors and key messages and your brand personality, the typography really has to align with those key brand identity elements that you've created because the way a font looks does send a message to a consumer. So that's what we're going to learn about today. So as you know, we're working on our branding assignment, our brand evaluation. I want to have you take out your brand evaluation guide, and we are going to be working on this piece right here, the typography. You are going to evaluate your client's existing typography as we discuss this concept. And then I want you to create a recommendation for the typography based on what you've learned. So that said, we are going to focus on understanding the psychology of typography because as with colors and imagery, there is a distinct way that the brand or the brain will interpret a typeface. So secondly, you're going to compare and contrast the various types of typeface based on the brand personality that you've created or that your client has created. And then I want you to analyze your client's existing fonts on their website in their printed material based on psychology. And I want you to recommend two typefaces for their brand. So why are we doing this? It is because no matter what you do or say, in your messaging or your visuals, typography always has an impact. And we call this visual rhetoric. So just like imagery, it sends a message to the brain on what it means as it relates to you and as it relates to the brand's personality. So typefaces are artifacts that are stored in a semantic memory. So if you remember from consumer behavior, what we are trying to do is to translate the message from first to get it stored into short-term memory and then have it flow through the process of storing into long-term memory. And that doesn't happen without a lot of different tricks that we do and tips that we do with imagery, colors, typography, as well as using that message many, many times. So you'll see here, I have an infographic on various types of typography. And you'll see here that your traditional book face is a serif font. And then we have more of an elegant or a script font. We've got what you might see Disney using or some other type of font that somebody will create on their own. That's called display. And then we have more of the modern fonts, which are sans serif. And the difference between a serif and a sans serif font is that a serif has a little tail on it that you could probably see right here, and sans serif doesn't. So I want you to look at these 5 logos that I have here. And they all use a specific font. And you know that you're probably familiar with all of these different brands. And what you probably don't realize is that they spent a lot of time looking at the scripts for their particular brands. Here we've got Cadillac, which is a script font. And if you look at that, there's probably a message that triggers to your brain in maybe luxury or maybe high end. And as you looked at a script, typically we're looking at it embodies some sort of elegance. Whereas the display font is fun and exciting. And look at their use of color in here. This is a display font that Disney has created themselves. Google is using a serif here. I will say that this is an old Google. They now use a sans serif, meaning there's no tail. It's just a regular, maybe an Arial font here. And then the modern font is more tech related. And then also a sans serif is also a little bit more modern and less of a traditional font like we're seeing here with the serifs and the scripts. So you can see here that each of these fonts, based on the personality of the company, sends a very different message. So now I want to describe to you, as you look at imagery, as you start to evaluate different messages in imagery, there are different fonts that can trigger a sensory response to your audience. So let's look at here. Sans serif, you can think of as very plain and neutral. Maybe just something neutral, like Aquafina or some type of water. Now, if you look at slab serif, this is going to resonate in your mind as something. So when I look at this, I kind of think of maybe, something a little Western. Maybe I'm thinking of a butcher shop or some sort of meaty type of font that aligns to this image. Now, a round font, you may think of sweet. And a jagged font, you may think of salty or sour. So each one of these fonts evokes a sensory image in your mind that might remind you of something that you've seen, maybe a butcher shop, maybe some fancy sandwich shop, maybe a candy store, or maybe just a plain old bottle of water. But think about if you were just to see those fonts alone, how they might trigger a response as to what type of personality or what type of industry that business might be in. So I'll just show you a little bit here. We've already gone over this a little bit. So the difference between a serif and a sans serif is that the serif has a tail. The sans serif is just very, very plain, like an Arial font, a little bit more modern than the traditional font. The script font is just as you see it here. It's a cursive type of font. And then decorative fonts are custom, like we saw with the Disney, or maybe some other company where the Hulu, like they probably come up with their own. So now I want to take a minute to show you a tool that's called that you can use to evaluate or select different fonts. And this tool is fonts.google.com. Now I want you, for your client, to evaluate their font. I also want you to think about selecting 2 fonts that they can use for their brand identity. So if you can see here, Google has thousands of different fonts. And what I love about Google is that all of these fonts are free. You can spend all kinds of money having somebody create you a font, but these fonts are really, they're free. You can download them right to your computer. You can use them on your web properties. But here you can see that you can just scroll down and try to find a font that aligns to your brand personality. So maybe you're going to have like a fun font. I have to tell you, this isn't going to be easy to read on the web. But there's other fonts here too. Like one of my favorite fonts for the web is called Montserrat. I don't know if I can see it here. Is there a Montserrat? I don't see it. But anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to go through and look for a font that you believe is going to align with your brand strategy and that you think will look good on the web as well as printed information. So I'm going to type Montserrat here. Montserrat. Oh, you know what? That's going to show you what the font looks like in something. So this is really cool. You can just kind of make up your own See what the font looks like on your own. You can see anything you need to know about these fonts. So yeah, I just messed it up, didn't I? So anyway, okay. So what I want you to do, let's say for example, you want Roboto because you think Roboto is modern and fun and easy to read on the web. What you can do is you can download that if you'd like. You can select it. You can select it in different pixels. But this will allow you to be able to create a font or look at a font that you believe matches that personality of your particular brand. So Google Fonts. There's some other free font sites out there as well, but I tell you, why not use Google? It's free. It's going to work with any of your web builders, and it's just a pretty cool tool. So I want you to select a primary font and a secondary font. So just a couple more things to think about. Now, when you're designing your mobile apps, your web pages, your stories, etc., you want to make sure that there's good white spaces. There's plenty of space between your lines, that you have vertical rhythm, meaning there's a good consistent flow of content between the header, the headline, the body copy. You want it to look organized and professional. So just remember that if you're mixing fonts or if you're creating a story, make sure, or a post on your web page or your web design, make sure that you've got good white space. It's easy to read, and that it's not too congested. So I know that was a short video, but what I want you to remember is that fonts are as important in sending a message to consumers about the personality of your brand. So think about, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and how can you use these tools, Google Fonts, and there's some other tools in Canvas. How can you use these in your daily life, in your marketing job, and for the clients, and to help you finish up this assignment you have. So do you have questions or comments? As always, email me, Dr. Kristy in Canvas, and or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel to get this and other videos to help you with your branding strategy and other courses that I teach. So have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon.